I caught the foxwoman stealing my food, so I let her stay instead. The first time I saw her, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. It was well past midnight, and the forest behind my cabin hummed with the low calls of night insects. I had left a pot of rabbit stew cooling by the window, too tired after chopping firewood to properly store it. My little home was remote. No neighbors, no thieves. At least that's what I believed. When I heard the faint scrape of claws against the wooden sill, I froze. Slowly I turned my head. A shadow bent over the pot. Not a shadow. Figure. Her hair fell in tangled waves, dark and glossy under the moonlight. A pair of pointed ears twitched atop her head, for the color of embers in a dying fire. Her hands were slender but tipped with claws, and behind her swayed a great brush of a tail, red, streaked with silver. She ladled stew into her mouth with desperate gulps, steam fogging her face. Foxwoman. I had heard the old stories told in the village. Tricksters, thieves, and seducers. Spirits who lived between human and beast. But seeing her crouched there, shivering in the night air with hunger gnawing at her bones, made her seem less like a legend and more like a creature of flesh and need. Cleared my throat. She jolted, spilling stew down her front. Her golden eyes widened, glowing like twin lanterns. For a heartbeat, we only stared at one another, silence taut as a bowstring. Then she bolted. But I was quicker than she expected. My hand shot out, catching her wrist before she could leap through the window. Her claws scratched my arm, but I held firm. "Let go," she hissed, teeth flashing. "You're stealing from me," I said. "At least have the decency to look me in the eye while you do it." Her ears flattened. She tried to wrench free, then sagged against the sill, panting. "I was hungry," she whispered. Something in her voice, tired, cracked, almost human, loosened my grip. She rubbed her wrist where my fingers had been, glaring at me with wounded pride. I expected her to flee into the forest. Instead, she sank to her knees, tail curling around herself. "I haven't eaten in days," she murmured. I studied her. Her ribs pressed against her skin, her clothes little more than rags. Trickster spirit or not, she looked ready to collapse. Against my better judgment, I sighed and stepped back. "Sit at the table," I said. "If you're going to steal my food, you may as well eat it properly." Inside, she perched warily on the edge of a chair, as if expecting a trap. I ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her. She didn't thank me, only devoured it in silence, tail flicking with each greedy bite. When the bowl was empty, she licked it clean, then cast a suspicious glance my way. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" "Should I be?" Her lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "Most humans run screaming when they see a fox spirit. Or they chase me with knives." Shrugged. "You don't look much like a monster. Just cold. And hungry." Her golden eyes softened, just for an instant. Then she looked away. We spoke little that night. When she finished, I offered her a blanket and a place near the hearth. She hesitated, claws twitching, but exhaustion won out. I woke at dawn to find her curled in a tight ball, tail wrapped around her body, breathing slow and even. Days turned into weeks. She returned again and again, sometimes skulking at the window until I invited her in. Other times she appeared boldly, dragging half-burned logs for the fire or bundles of herbs from the forest. She still ate like a starving wolf, but slowly her cheeks filled, her shoulders straightened. I learned her name one night as snow fell thick outside. "Kaya," she whispered when I asked. Her voice trembled, as if the word itself was dangerous. "Yeah." She began to smile more after that. A real smile, not the sharp baring of teeth she first showed me. She laughed when I fumbled chopping vegetables, her tail thumping the floor in amusement. She sat by the fire weaving little charms from twine and feathers, claiming they kept bad spirits away. Yet sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her gaze wandered to the forest. A shadow of longing crossed her face, the look of someone who had lived too long in exile. The night of the storm came suddenly. Wind screamed through the trees, rattling the shutters. I found Kaya outside, struggling to brace the roof against the gale. Rain plastered her hair to her face, her tail whipping in the tempest. "You'll be blown away," I shouted, dragging her inside. She resisted at first, then collapsed against me, trembling. "I can't go back out there," she whispered. "If I leave, I'll never survive the winter." I held her tighter, feeling the fragile bones of her shoulders. "Then don't leave," I said. "Stay." For a long time she was silent. Then slowly she nodded. Winter buried the forest in white silence. Kaya stayed. She cooked with me, laughed with me, sometimes teased me with sly tricks that reminded me she was no ordinary woman. But when night fell and the fire crackled low, she sat close, warmth radiating from her like the heart of the hearth itself. I had caught a thief that night by the window. Instead I found a companion. And though the village still whispered their warnings of fox spirits, I knew the truth. Kai was no monster. She was family. Winter buried the forest in silence, the snow muffling every sound except the crackle of my hearth. Kai stayed. At first, it felt strange, sharing my cabin with someone who was once a stranger, a thief, a foxwoman born from myth. But day by day, the strangeness gave way to something warmer. She learned how to stir stew without burning it, though she still tasted everything before it was finished, smirking when I scolded her. She mended my torn coat with nimble fingers, her claws working as though they were needles. And when I grew weary from chopping wood, she appeared at my side with a teasing grin, carrying twice my load as if to remind me she was still more fox than human. But at night, when the fire dimmed and the forest howled outside, she sat close. Her golden eyes softened, no longer sharp with suspicion but bright with trust. Sometimes her tail brushed against me like a question she didn't know how to ask. I thought often of that first night, when I caught her stealing and could have turned her away. What would my cabin be now? Cold, quiet, empty, if I had let her vanish back into the forest. One evening, as frost painted the window panes and her laughter filled the room, I realized something with startling clarity. I had not simply allowed her to stay. I had needed her here. I caught a thief that night by the window. Instead, I had found a companion, a guardian, and, though the words felt dangerous to speak aloud, something closer to family. The village would still whisper of fox spirits. But I no longer cared. 'Cause Kaya was no monster. She was home.